Hello and welcome to today's episode of the A-List, where I am joined by writer, producer, audio drama extravaganza, and actress Kim Billinton.
Hi.
How's it going?
It's going great. It's been a busy past few years, and as you said, doing a bit of everything.
Yeah.
But loving doing it.
So you have quite the bouquet of talent. And when I first met you, it was as a writer.
Yeah.
But I also know you as a performer, both voice and on screen. What came first?
What came first? Well, I've always liked writing as a kid. I thought I was actually going to be a novel writer, and then decided, because I really like character. So for me, when I was writing novels, it was like expanding out these fleshed out characters, and I didn't really like the world building part of it. So when I was in high school, I kind of moved to writing screenplays because I was like, oh, I don't have to describe the scenery and setting. I can just play with these characters. But at the same time, I actually want to say it was about the same time my love of acting on stage started in just middle school productions and things like that. But I didn't really think I had the look to be an actor, which I know now isn't really, what I should have been worried about. And so I, was focused in writing. I would be writing every day, all the time. I did really, really well in school, but I was one of those people that would split my brain and be really focused on that. I think I was just bored in school. And so at the same time, I would be writing something, and that just kind of spiraled into what happens today.
Wow. So did it start like you were a big reader and then got into writing, or?
I was a big reader back then. Unfortunately, I'm not now. And I think that's just going through university and, then you're forced to read papers and textbooks and all that stuff. And I think I lost some of that joy. I'm trying to get it back. But when I was a kid, I was a huge reader. My parents definitely instilled reading. They would read me bedtime stories every night as a kid, and I think that's super important because it gets that love of reading into children and the love of storytelling. And I used to read a lot. I competed in Battle of the Books as a kid where they make you read 12 books and then you do trivia on it. And for my school, when I was in elementary school, I was always, the librarians were my favorite people in whatever school I was in because I would spend so much time in the library. But yeah, nowadays I do way more writing than reading. And because I want to write for TV, I do a lot more research watching TV.
Well, and I think consumption of entertainment has a very steep curve.
Yeah.
There's just so much available that we can watch.
There's so much content.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite writer or somebody that inspired you in your writing?
I would say not necessarily writing, but all of it. I'm a big Shonda Rhimes fan. I think for a female showrunner out there, just, absolutely killing it. I think I decided back in high school, first year university, I was like, that's who I want to be in the future.
Shonda Rhimes.
Yeah.
Shout out Shonda Rhimes. I'm not familiar. I probably am familiar with her work, but I'm not familiar
Grey's
with her.
Anatomy,
Okay.
Station 19, How to Get Away with Murder, which was one of my favorite shows, which, if you listen to Where the Leaves Fell Purple, it kind of has that similar vibe. Yeah, she's incredible and just has a whole host of shows out there that she's the showrunner on.
That's cool. Touching on her, but segueing into people that are on the production side or producer side of things, which you are, and as well as your writing, often there is branding, right? If I said Stephen King, most of us are going to think horror writer, even though he does, go
other
out
things,
of that.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Have you found your branding? Because, we just gave a little touch on to a project.
So I write a whole lot of things. I say my branding is actually writing stories about young adults / teenagers that deal with themes of finding themselves, identity, and world issues at that time is what I usually tell people. It's a bit of a cop-out answer, so I don't have to say genre. But I think lately, especially in the Okanagan, I've been known as the thriller girl because that's what I end up writing. I also really love writing period pieces. But yeah, the psychological thriller, the crime, all of that is kind of become my niche.
Was there an early childhood fascination? You mentioned How to Solve a Murder, but was there anything else that uh, falls under that category or something that you glommed onto early?
You know, I can actually think of the first time I saw a true crime story on TV, and I think it really scared me. And that's what was interesting to me about it, was that it stuck in my brain. And it was about the Skylar Neese case and how her two friends ended up killing her. And it was so like awful to me. But I kept thinking about it and thinking about it. And I was like, how could someone get to that point? How can whatever? And, you know, it kind of started an interest in some of the true crime stuff. And it wasn't until I was in university when I was working a desk job, which I loved doing. It was a great job in social media. But as I told you, I kind of split my brain between, you know, doing something creative and when I'm not. And so I would start listening to podcasts. And at the same time, that's also how I got into audio drama. But I was listening to a lot of true crime podcasts at the time and that content. And I think that it's a bad thing to say we like true crime because I don't think that's what it is. I think there's a fascination, especially as women, on these acts because knowing about them almost feels like safer because you're like, oh, okay, if this can happen, then, you know, then what would I do and all this stuff. And it just gets into your head, and maybe it's not a healthy fixation, but a lot of people have it.
I mean, it's one of the top genres and
Exactly.
it's doing very, very well.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I haven't really thought about it in the way that you just described, though the study of the sublime and being able to sort of get to that precipice of like safety, not safe, right? We do
Yeah.
enjoy, you know, roller coasters, slasher films, these kinds of things. I think it all sort of fits under that umbrella. And I mean, you know, America's Most Wanted, Unsolved Mysteries, those shows have been long running.
Exactly. And with, you know, the introduction of like the YouTube video essay, that's another big thing I think that is.
I'm not familiar. YouTube essay.
Okay, so someone will come and essentially present like a, let's say in true crime, a case. And, you know, they'll do it with the pictures and videos and all that stuff.
Okay.
And it's like presenting like a thesis or a presentation that they've researched and done all that. And it's almost like a podcast in visual form, kind of like what you're doing here.
Totally.
But I think between that and how freely available this is on social media and the way algorithms work, I think it's really easy to get sucked into that. And that's why it's become one of these top genres, is because there is that fascination. And then as well with podcasts and, you know, people always on the go wanting that noise. I even know people who fall asleep to true crime podcasts. I cannot do it. I have an overactive imagination, overactive brain. But yeah, it's just gotten that big. And, you know, that was something that I think because I'm afraid of it, I find it very interesting to capture, because if I'm afraid of it, someone else must be too. And so it plays off that. I don't like jump scares. I don't like all of that. I like the psychological side of it, or like is the wrong word, but I find that fascinating. And so being scared of everything, I think makes it really easy to write something that is scary for people.
Fair enough. You're somebody that I've experienced that you have a great acute sense of detail. Like you're very detail oriented, and I would imagine that pairs well with true crime and following, and likely as for some of us that do fall asleep to a podcast or something, you're somebody that's is paying attention to those details and therefore you know, going down that rabbit hole. So flipping that over from somebody who's digesting that and taking those things in, what about the writing side of it? Because anything that's like a thriller that has red herrings and plot twists and that, like it's got you would have to have a really large brain map to do that. And you've just released an audio drama that is a true crime audio drama. Not true. What do you call it?
I call it like a fictional, you know, it's almost like a fictional true crime. but it's showing the other side of it. So it's about for those of you who don't know, it's called Where the Leaves Fall Purple. It's about a university student whose name is Ben Miller, and he runs a failing true crime podcast. He can't get anyone to listen to it. So he asked his best friend, Janie Melnick, who I also happen to do the voice of, to quote unquote go missing, and he'll solve her disappearance on his podcast. But things go downhill when she really does go missing. So instead of a fictional crime he knew how to solve, he has potentially a very real crime that he may have inadvertently caused. And so that's the premise of our series. It's 12 episodes. They vary in length, and it's a whodunit. So you want to figure out, what happened to Janie. I won't spoil anything, but there's a bunch of mysteries throughout, and with each episode, we kind of focus on another person who maybe it could be as we jump. And every episode kind of ends on a cliffhanger to the next one. And so writing that, I knew where we started. And so I was like, here's the premise, here are all the characters. When I pitched it, it was, here's my core cast. I had actually written out episode by episode what I wanted to happen. If you look at the initial structure, it is not the same. I think, and my audio editor, Tyler Gillis at Aftertouch Audio, will attest to this. I called him up and I think I was like, oh yeah, we're going to do like 8 episodes max, and they're each going to be 20 minutes long. We're at 12 episodes, and our longest is like over an hour. So
shout out Tyler Gillis.
I have to, because he's stuck with me this whole time, and this series wouldn't have happened without him. But when I was writing it, though, I had these ideas of what were going to happen, what were the big points, and I think that's really, really important. You say I'm detail-oriented, and it's funny because I am in that way, but I hate outlining. I hate drafting these things. I like knowing the big things, but I don't like a scene by scene, putting myself into that box. For this one, I had to a little bit more than I'm used to. It was a great exercise in, writing. There was 10 scripts, but 12 episodes. And I knew, you have to know when you write a thriller whodunit at the start, because if you don't, then you're just writing aimlessly and hoping something pops out at you. But when you know who's the one, who perpetrated the crime, and you know how you get there, it's actually really easy then to fill the puzzle pieces in between. So I actually found my brain a couple of times when I was writing would hide clues in there that I wouldn't realize till after they were written. Like, I would have moments where I was like, oh, because I wrote that actually relates to that, which relates to that, which makes it at the end. Yeah, my brain, I think, works in a very strange way. I'm not sure if other writers have the same experience as I do, but it's all about knowing your characters. So knowing their motivation and knowing why they do what they do and how they get there. Because if you don't know who's involved and who the players are, it's like playing a game of Clue. Like, they all have their very defined roles, and we remember them. But we have a certain one that we want to play each time, right? So you have to have those people that you latch on to, that play their role in this mystery, because otherwise I think you end up with, if the crime is the centerpiece, that's totally fine, but you have to care about the people who are getting there, and what they find, and who's involved, and why they're involved, and their motives. And so the first step really is, how it starts, how it ends, or who done it. We didn't actually know how it ends till, I think, a couple weeks before it was the very last scene, but we can talk about that later. But knowing, who did what for what reason, that's really what drove it, who had secrets. And my cast actually didn't necessarily know who did it until their character knew, or until they needed to know, because I wanted that portrayal of, they're also genuinely trying to guess and trying to figure out, and, there's an authenticity there. Yeah.
So during this process, you're surprising yourself, you're making discoveries along the way through how many drafts? Did you do it by draft, or like?
For each episode, or for just kind of in?
Like you were saying, the initial concept evolved.
It did, yeah.
Right. So, how far of an arc from, newborn baby to releasing this warrior adult into the world? Like,
You know what? I think the base idea of Where the Leaves Fall Purple, before it was even called Where the Leaves Fall Purple, just kind of a character dynamic and an idea came to me while I was waitressing, and it would have been probably about 3 or 4 years before Where the Leaves Fall Purple was actually a thing. But that idea was like completely different. Where the Leaves Fall Purple, the name came, I was raking leaves and I found a really pretty purple leaf. And there's a note in my phone that just says Where the Leaves Fall Purple. I think I was just saying things in my head where I was like, what could you do around a leaf, blah, blah, blah. And then I actually had to figure out where the Leaves Fall Purple actually meant, and to write a story based on it. And what had happened was, in an acting class, I had met someone who had invited me to come pitch an idea to her. And it was this moment of like, oh no, like I have tons of ideas. What can I manageably do? And audio drama was kind of the best format at the time because, we were going through what the world was going through in 2020, 2021. And I wanted a way for creatives to get back out there safely, start working. And I wanted to, give people opportunities and also make that opportunity for myself to, write something, produce something and all that. And I needed to come up with an idea quick. And so I was pulling kind of ideas from other things that I'd had. And Where the Leaves Fall Purple was born. So I actually can't pinpoint what the initial idea was. And then when I went into it trying to put together the first episode, it was kind of the first and second episode together, and the order of things was wrong. And when I went to try and write it, it just wasn't coming together. And so I had to kind of take a step back and go, okay, logically, how do these characters, character-driven, move through things? How do we introduce them all? What are their dynamics with each other? Which is why if you listen to the show, it takes 2 episodes to really get to Where the Leaves Fall Purple happens. The first one, you're really meeting these people because, again, they're the ones who drive the story. And there are certain episodes where there were definitely I have a weird thing with drafts where I don't necessarily write a whole draft through and then decide I don't like it and go back to the start. If there is a point where it just stops working, I open up a new document and I restart. I'll copy and paste the scenes that I like, but I will just restart the script, and I keep everything. So I have probably I don't know, there's hundreds of scripts that, some of them have 2 pages in them, or I have a document called Cut Bits, which is just cut pieces from Where the Leaves Fall Purple. I think the most drafts I had on an episode, I think it was that episode 9, 10, I think it got up to draft 7. And that's probably not counting where I just scrap things and out. But I was working on that episode until I think we had the table read you were there that day at, 10 a.m. and I finished the script at 2 a.m. before I brought it to you guys. Yeah.
Wow.
We didn't go into recording it for weeks after, but some pressure helped.
It's interesting that pressure and deadlines, for some reason, can be part of the motivation. What do you think that is, or have you discovered?
I don't know exactly what it is, but I think having that little bit of pressure for that episode, at least, the characters were under a whole lot of pressure. So having myself have a little bit of pressure on me, it was easier to get into that headspace. That's not healthy. Don't necessarily recommend it. But I think it's good to be accountable to yourself. But in this show, I was also show running it. And I was accountable to 30 other actors on this project. Even if they weren't in that episode, they were wanting to hear it. I think we had 30 actors, 5 crew members. And just knowing, we also did it in a way where I'm not sure I would do it like this again, but we were releasing while we were still editing and still recording. It definitely added a lot of extra pressure for the whole team. But we were also then accountable to our fans. And at that point, they were like, who did it? They had their guesses. They were asking us online. And it was slow growing, but there were still some really, really dedicated people who were talking about us on social media. And, by the end of the series, it's a bit of a love letter to them as well, because they have their favorite characters. They have those people they're following. They're really invested in this mystery that, I've created, my whole team has created. And having that, knowing that there are other people out there where this matters to them is a good motivator. And, not everyone gets that, but I really hope that's something everybody experiences one day, is having those fans.
So you mentioned something about, in the future you might not release episodes as you're still recording.
Yeah.
I happen to be privy to a little bit of information. Walk us through one of the adversities that you went through, which was you had to change a main character's voice.
Yeah,
correct?
So I won't talk too much about reasons behind it. It happened twice in the series for various reasons. Maybe one day we'll talk about it. But 11th Hour hero Corey Hendricks stepped in to play Ben Miller. And we had a deadline because we were at a convention on, I think it was like July 14th. This was in May. And I remember the phone call to Corey being like, hey, this happened, filling him in on the story. And I think there were a couple people we were looking at, got his audition, and I think he was in the booth within like a week of auditioning. And our plan was initially that he was going to be the only person to re-record. And that did not happen, because when we went to put it together 2 weeks later, we realized, hey, Aaron Johnson, who plays Ezra, Corey, who plays Ben, their voices were a little too similar at the time.
Oh, wow.
And, it's funny because I've gone into, I've done presentations at a high school in an audio drama, and, I told them the story, and the kids listen to it, and they're like, they don't sound the same at all. But I will talk to someone who's a lot older, and they'll find that the voices sound a lot more similar than someone who's younger. And it's because people talk in a similar way when they're in a similar demographic. It's actually funny because I found there were times where Tommy was sounding a lot like you and he just had the one scene. Because, again, if you're raised in a similar area, you're of a similar age, and you grew up around similar people, you have maybe theater training or film training or whatever, you end up talking a certain way. And if you're in that demographic, you're not going to notice it as much as someone who's not in that demographic.
Sure.
And so directing for audio is kind of like listening to music and knowing where everybody lands, and or directing music, I guess. Conducting, that's the word I'm looking for, where everybody lands and everything. So we basically restarted 2 months before release of that first episode, and that was our second time restarting, because there was another major character we had thought was going to work out and didn't, for reasons. And at that time it was a bit of a morale bump, like it just, we lost a little momentum for a while. We picked it back up, but it was hard. It was really hard. It was hard for me, knowing that the situation, there was nothing I could have done about it, and just having to go forward. And this was, again, before there were fans behind it, but we had so many actors involved, so many community members supporting us. And I had started, and I was so far in that it was just like, this has to happen. We have to do this. It sucks, but we really, really need to keep going. And I'm so glad we did. But I think it was a bunch of resilience. If you listen to, there is another cut of the first episode. We will never release it, obviously. The words are pretty much the same, but the tone of it is totally different with the different actors. And, I can go back and listen to that one and be like, I'm not glad everything happened. That's a weird way to put it. But I know everything happened for a reason, and we had a better product at the end because of it.
I subscribe to the thought that everything does happen for a reason. And a journey is the part that gets us to those goals or those destinations. So that's pretty cool. So fast forward to where The Leaves Fall Purple is now. Mm-hmm. All 12 episodes are released. They're out there.
Yeah.
People are listening to them. From what I understand, there's a good chunk of people that have listened to it.
Yeah.
So if you're hearing this and you haven't heard about Where the Leaves Fall Purple, now's a great time to down below and check it out. And you have yours truly in there. Where is it now? Mm-hmm. And then maybe paint a bit of a picture as to where you'd like to see it go.
So right now, it's crazy to me to look at where it's being listened to. It is truly international. We actually have more listeners in the States than we do in Canada, but they're close numbers. Our other top listener, Great Britain, Germany, Sweden, Norway, Australia. We're charting in countries where I'm like, how did you find us? Like Moldova, Israel, United Arab Emirates even at one point. I don't know, some of these could be VPN, but a lot of them, people are coming out of the woodworks and being like, I'm from here and I listen to this, and it floors me. We've had about 14,000 downloads so far, and it's growing every day, which is really, really exciting to me. We're looking to do a re-release of the first season on YouTube for people who don't use podcasting platforms, because, that was a bit of a hurdle. I have a bunch of friends who've listened to it who's like, I've never heard a podcast in my life before, whether it be an audio drama or a podcast.
Sure. And
started listening because of the show. And, getting into the medium, and I thought that was really cool. We would like to do a season 2. There have been talks of it. I know you haven't heard this. It's a little bit based on funding and all that stuff right now and just where everything's at. But we have, started talking about story writing things. I've written the first scene. If you've listened to the show, the very, very last scene is like is there more? Is there not? It's not a cliffhanger that I think people would be really upset if there wasn't more, but we have had a lot of people asking season 2. I would love to do it again. Do it again differently so that I'm not pulling my hair out and, crying as often. But, it was an amazing experience being, I think, the first audio drama out of the Okanagan and, introducing people to the medium. I would love to see more of it happen. It's an incredible way, I think, to tell a story, and it's still growing and evolving and catching on. And yeah, like I said, I've just caught that bug. I want to do more.
What's your goal with season 1? What would be a number? Have you already surpassed the number you wanted in terms of downloads, or?
I don't think I actually had a goal. I know I wanted that first 10K. I was like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen. My goal now is pretty arbitrary. I want about 33,000 downloads because that's the amount of people that live in West Kelowna. So if we can surpass the number of people that live in the place that we made it, I think that would be really cool. Just, in all the interviews we've done and all that stuff, a big part is that living on this side of the bridge, there's a saying in our series that nothing happens in Dodgewood, which is the name of the town. And in the last episode, Ben Miller says, nothing happens in Dodgewood until you make it happen. And I really believe that that's true. Nothing happens until you actually go and do it. And so for me, Dodgewood in a way was West Kelowna in that it's a smaller area. Things are happening, but just not to the same level as other places. And I really believe in growing together and making opportunities for other people. And I think that's super important, that you cannot get to the top or wherever you're trying to go on your own. It just doesn't happen. You think of pretty much any profession, like you need the help of other people. You need to build your community. And so if I'm making a project, I want it to be just as valuable for the people who are involved, because I know that I need them to get where I'm going, and maybe they don't need me, but having those relationships, I really subscribe to be kind always. Have that team, have that group. And in the entertainment industry, I think we can get very competitive. I think that there can often be people who think that everybody is their competition. And especially in actors, and I think, to some extent that's true. You look at, like, someone might fit the same demographic as you, and only one of you is going to get the role, or only one of you is going to get the job. And while that's true, I think that there's an element of, collaboration, working together and celebrating each other, because, they might get that job this time, but they'll remember you the next time they can't do it and suggest you, or vice versa. And going into the audio drama community was really, really nice because it's so international, but independent creators really support each other. Before our show even started, we had other podcasts sharing the first images of like the show, the teasers, all of that, saying they couldn't wait for it. And what that taught me was really despite the fact you're competing for listener hours and numbers against each other, and yeah, I can get jealous when I see a show that has 100,000 downloads already, but so I remember that those are the same people though that are elevating your voice with theirs. And they want to see other shows succeed as well, because we were talking about it earlier. You mentioned how there's so much content out there, and that's true. But we do go from one show to the next show to the next show. None of these shows are infinite. You can't listen to them unless you're listening to the same thing over and over and over again in your life. And so it's very important, I think, to build that community where you support each other, uplift each other's voices, because everybody has a unique voice and something to say. And there's stories out there that need to be told, need to be heard, and you need to recognize that it's not only your story or your portrayal, or you're not the center of this universe. It's a world where, especially in this industry, we're all working together.
Very well put. So if you are an aspiring writer, or you are a writer that is thinking about producing or coming up with an audio drama, please reach out, and we will have some information down below where you can connect. But before we let you go, I have to, this is a little game quirk that we play with each guest. So there's a comet coming down to smash the Earth.
Oh no.
The good news is it's not powerful enough to do anything to the humans, and it wipes out all of the known cinema creations except for 5 that have been put in a vault by yourself. So you got to give us 5 movies in 10 seconds. Otherwise, it's going to penetrate the vault as well.
Okay.
And
just movies.
Yep.
Talking
Cue
movies.
music. 10 seconds. Go.
Okay. Well, I'm keeping The Lost Boys. That's my favorite movie. We're gonna say Toy Story, because as much as I like The Incredibles better, it was the start of the Pixar era. Disney's Hercules. Love that movie. Stand By Me. And you know what? So much of this movie's already been lost, but it was so important in cinema. I don't even like the movie, but I'm gonna say Metropolis.
Whoa. I'm sorry for the future. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I'm just going back to the ones that were important in cinema. I mean, I probably should have said so many different things. But you're giving me 10 seconds, and I named 2 Disney movies.
That's why it's a little game. That's super fun. And the good, better news is that's not going to happen.
Although, fun fact, I think it's, 90% of movies made before 1920 are completely lost, no copies left. Lost media. And before 1950s, I think it's 60%. So back up those movies, everybody. And, with streaming platforms, Disney Plus just pulled, I think, 30 originals off their platform. Who knows if we'll see them again.
Save your VHSs.
So, but those don't release on DVD anymore. So, there is that fear that, things could just go away. And
if Kim is in control,
everything's staying. It's going on a streaming platform.
Well, those 5 movies are going to be.
Yeah, I think Metropolis was a bad option, but I panicked.
No, that's what we get.
I didn't even like the movie, but it's important. It's important to cinema history.
It is important. Thank you so much for coming by. It's a pleasure, and looking forward to hearing more about what you're up to, and we'll have you back, especially if there is a season 2 of Where the Leaves Fall Purple. Everybody, go out.
Yeah, the
download
more people
it now.
who stream it.
Listen. All right. Sweet.